Michele McKenzie, our speaker tonight. Michele is currently the interim CEO of Tourism Nova Scotia, and for the past 13 years, I believe it was, she was CEO and President of Tourism Canada, based in Vancouver. So she's up on her tourism for sure, and tonight's going to speak on the Valley Tourism Guided Report and growing this province a little better than it's growing at the moment. So, Michele.
It's really good to be here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll use a mic if you can't hear me. It's really great to be in Wolfville. I was thinking about that when I was driving down here, and I've had this love affair with Wolfville kind of all my life. And if you read my high school yearbook little blurb, it says I was looking forward to going to Acadia. And I never did go to Acadia. I actually couldn't afford to go to Acadia. So I stayed living in Dartmouth, and I went to Dalhousie. But I always wanted to move to Wolfville. And right out of university, one of the first jobs I applied for was as a recreation director in Wolfville. And I got the date of the interview mixed up. And I was working in a job as the coordinator of the Joseph Howe Festival in Halifax. And I got a call saying that, where are you? And I was supposed to be here for an interview, and I missed it. So I feel like I've had these little kind of brushes with potentially being in Wolfville, but never really happened. So anyway, maybe that'll still happen.
I hope so.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So I'm here. I'm the interim CEO of Tourism Nova Scotia, and that's because I'm consulting now. And that's actually the consulting I do. I'm doing interim leadership work for organizations that are going through transitions. And Tourism Nova Scotia is going through a transition because it's a brand new Crown corporation. In Nova Scotia, it was a government agency, and it's still owned by government, but now it's a corporation. And there's been a lot of leadership shown by people like Judy, who's here, in the past to get us to where we are. We wanted a Crown corporation for governing tourism in Nova Scotia for a long time. And that's because we can bring more of a private sector acumen, private sector decision-making to the table to guide tourism going forward. So the stars kind of all aligned after the Ivany report came out, and voila, we have a Crown corporation, and we have very, very high expectations of what we can accomplish here with the potential that Nova Scotia has. So I'm going to talk to you tonight about what we're thinking about, what our strategy is, what we're doing. I'd love for you to pipe in with any of your questions or ideas as I go through this. And we'll have some time at the end for questions, but please feel free to interrupt me. Some of you may know this fellow on the slide. His name is Dominic Barton. He's the Global Managing Director for McKenzie & Company, a global management consulting company. He's Canadian. And a few years ago, he did a lecture for the Federal Public Service, which is an annual lecture, and he presented this information, which was very surprising to most federal public servants, especially the people that I work most closely with in Industry Canada, because they'd never really thought about tourism as being a big opportunity for Canada. It's always been seen as a bit of a fluffy industry, maybe a soft industry, and not as serious an industry as others for Canada. But what he was recognizing that in the world, tourism is a growing industry. It's one of the fastest growing industries in the world. It's the largest service export industry for Canada, the largest service export industry for Nova Scotia, and that we had this great potential, and that if we didn't take advantage of that potential, for sure others would be there to take that business. So very, very competitive, and that we had a great opportunity. He was also reflecting on the fact that when you have a great tourism brand, you have a great business brand, and they don't compete with each other, that they actually support each other very, very well. So it's an interesting perspective, and I thought I would just throw that into the mix tonight. He was also reflecting on the fact that the world is changing quite dramatically, and especially the emergence of China as an outbound market for international visitors. And of course, it's the largest outbound market in the world now. It was about 10 years ago, it was number 12th or 13th for Canada. It's number 3 now in terms of volume. So it's come on very, very quickly. We're not seeing a lot of that growth here in Atlantic Canada, here in Nova Scotia. And so those are the types of opportunities that we can't ignore. And we have to really get serious about how we want to take advantage of what's happening globally. So tourism is 2% of our GDP in Nova Scotia. That doesn't sound like a lot, but that's 2% for Canada, so that's on par. We like tourism to be operating in a strong, diverse economy, so that's a good number. We'd like to see it get higher, but really not a lot higher, because we want the economy to be strong and diverse. So one way to see tourism grow in terms of relative GDP would to see other industries collapse. And we don't want to see that. That's not the kind of tourism we want in Canada, and not the kind of tourism we want in Nova Scotia. But if you think about what 2% of GDP is worth, it's equivalent, or more than actually, fishing, forestry, and agriculture combined as sectors. So very significant in terms of what it's already contributing to our economy. One of the things that I think is probably the greatest attribute of tourism in Nova Scotia is that it's, of all industries, it disperses jobs throughout the province more than any other economic sector. And it's a strong, very strong industry with potential for rural Nova Scotia. And we have a lot of talk about what industries have that potential. And rural Nova Scotia knows that, because that's why tourism was a priority sector in the Ivany report. Also, disruption is creating opportunities for smaller disruption is creating opportunities for marketers, and I've been in this business for like a really long time. And when I first started doing tourism marketing, it was all about controlling the message. You want to control, and we actually had control of the message. And that's what we were doing. We would control what the media would see. We would control everything, all the messaging. And now, absolutely, we're not in control. Now travelers are in control. They're actually telling other travelers where to go and what to do. So, the digital world has overtaken how travel is promoted, and that creates huge opportunities for a small destination. So we don't have to be a huge, big budget destination anymore. We just have to be smarter than the people that are competing in this industry. I also talk about Nova Scotia as a natural brand, and it sounds like a kind of a weird thing to think about a province as a brand, but it is a brand. You think about Nova Scotia, it has a positive connotation to people. Even if they don't know what Nova Scotia is, they think about it positively just by the name. You can kind of pick it out easily on a map. You think about if you were marketing Ontario, it kind of means actually nothing to people. Most people, if you looked at the map of Canada without borders on it, you could not, most Canadians can't actually show you where the borders of Ontario are easily, other than along the St. Lawrence River. So we've got this geography that's a great advantage. We're surrounded by the ocean, which is a fabulous advantage from a branding point of view. And so that's a great advantage when you think about relative to other Canadian provinces. And then I talked about the fact that investments in brand and our tourism brand are strong investments for other parts of our economy. So the Ivany, you all kind of know here who that guy is. But I think all Nova Scotians feel very warm toward the work that Ray has done to kind of lay it out there and say, this is kind of what we need to do. And there's been, now there's a successor report talking about how we might actually get there. But I think the thing that, I was living in Vancouver when this report came out. I was starting my consulting business. I had just retired from the Canadian Tourism Commission, and I was planning to move to Toronto. And I thought, so I started consulting, and I realized, first of all, my clients didn't care where I was. And secondly, the Ivany report hit, and I thought, I'm going back to Nova Scotia. This is really exciting. This is the time to go there, because we're now talking about the things that are the most meaningful in terms of what's going to drive us forward. And as I moved across the country, my kids followed me, and they graduated from university in different Canadian provinces. And I want them back here. I want them to have opportunities here. So to me, it's personal, and I think for all of us it's personal, and it is about what does the next generation have, and what's going to be here for them. So tourism, the report had a challenge to double tourism revenues, and as Judy and Loretta and some others in this room will know, this is not a new goal for people in the tourism business. We've been talking about trying to double tourism revenues in this industry for a very long time. But this is the first time that it ever hit the pages of a broad economic report and had people outside of the thinkers around the economy have embraced this as a possibility. So I came back to Nova Scotia, and then I had the opportunity to work with the what was then the Nova Scotia Tourism Agency to say, like, is that even possible? And a lot of people said that can't be possible. Like, we'd have to double the number of tourists. And we said, well, actually, you don't have to double the number of tourists. This is a revenue objective. We just need to get people to spend more money. We need to find tourists to spend more money, and we need more of them, but we don't need to double that number. So how are we going to do this? And we mapped that out, and I've even got the math at the back of this presentation. So we think that this is possible, and we've been leaning in since this report came out to say exactly how is that going to happen. So the first thing we did was we said, okay, we've got to decide who's going to have what role. Because in Nova Scotia, we don't have a lot of resources, and if we are not defining who's going to do what, we're going to be wasting the resources that we do have. So the theory was, if there's no more resources, let's make sure that we're spending them as wisely as we possibly can, and we're defining who's going to do what. So the role for Tourism Nova Scotia that we defined, and I'm going to explain what each one of these things means, is that we want to attract first-time visitors from markets of highest return. So what we're saying is we want to attract people who've never been here before. That's what we see the role of the Crown Corporation. And we want to get them from markets of highest return, people who have more money than the average traveler to Nova Scotia now, so that we're driving that revenue objective. We want to focus on world-class experiences, and I'll speak a little bit about that, because I think in Nova Scotia we've fallen into the trap of believing, well, we believe it rightfully, that we have a lot to offer. But when you go into the world and tell the world, come to Nova Scotia, we have everything, we have a lot to offer, we're not differentiating ourselves. So in marketing terms, that's not differentiating, and no one knows what you have. And for those of you who have been through business school and this university and others, when you can't market variety as a positioning. You have to stand for something that people think you are that differentiates you from others. So we had to figure out kind of what is it that we're world class in, and focus on that and use that to bring people here. And then finally focus on private sector initiatives that can attract first-time investment, first-time visitors. And that's kind of been the theme of my talk tonight. And what I've seen happen, not just in Nova Scotia, but in Canada and actually internationally, is that it's really private sector investment that's driving this business forward. And we've had some good examples of that in Nova Scotia, and I'm going to show them at the end of the presentation. I think we need to do a better job as leaders of tourism of going out and attracting more investment, making it easier for people here who are in the business here to find that investment and find investors from outside who are prepared to bring their money here and invest in what we have to offer. So if that's going to be the Crown Corporation's role, industry would have a role, and it would be different than this. So we're saying, and one of the things I've found in Nova Scotia is that we often like to think that if there's a problem, it's government's problem to solve. And having worked in government here, we thought it was our problem to solve. When people walk in the door, they have a problem, and we don't. We think, okay, we got to solve that problem. That's our problem to solve. And we can't solve every problem, especially in tourism marketing. We're marketing a product we don't own or control. Only the industry can close the sale. So the industry has to be the people who are going to close the sale if we're going to be out there leading the marketing. And then only industry can drive repeat visitation. So, and industry is kind of writ large here. I mean, you have some government players in industry, and like Parks Canada would be a big example of that. But I kind of firmly believe that only industry can drive repeat visitation, because if people have a great experience when they've come to Nova Scotia, they want to come back. It doesn't really matter how great or lousy our marketing is. And if they've had a lousy experience when they came to Nova Scotia, it doesn't really matter how great our marketing is, they're probably not going to come back. So repeat visitation will always be driven by the kind of experience that they've had. And then investing in product is something that industry can do. Access to capital is an issue, but industry will make those investments the most important investments that will drive this industry forward. And then industry will, of course, deliver on those world-class experiences. I'm going to give you some examples of what So government has a role, and that's really aligning the policy agenda and support. This sounds like really dry. Like, what do you mean by supporting policy agenda? But that would inform all these other things around, like things like community economic development, the attraction of inward investment. That last little bulldozer is supposed to have a word under it that says infrastructure. But that's really where I see government's role. And the example that I would use doesn't have to be a lot necessarily money. It can mean money, but not necessarily money. So for instance, as Nova Scotians, we've now made a huge investment in refurbishing the Blue Notes. And we've done that in the name of tourism. So largely in the name of tourism, probably mostly in the name of tourism. So what does it mean now if we're going to actually take advantage of that ship as a tourism, for its tourism potential? I believe that in order to do that, we should keep the ship in Nova Scotia and bring people here to want to come and see it. It used to be that we take the ship outside and use it to promote the province, and that was in the days before we had social media and in the days when we were controlling the message. Now that we're not controlling the message, others are controlling the message, we want them here, talking about their great experience here. And so it changes how we would use an asset like the Blue Notes. And that's an active discussion because, of course, there's, does the Blue Notes go out of the province? And if it did go to the province, of course, it would go in the good weather months. And, there you go. We would have one of our big draws, not here. So that's an example of a policy decision that could be very impactful in a revenue strategy. Another example would be in the olden days when I was working in Nova Scotia before I went to Vancouver, it was impossible to get the Department of Highways to think about paving shoulders of roads for bicycles. And I had a lot of those conversations with or highway engineers, and they really were of the belief that highways were for vehicles with wheels and, with engines. And that was it, so stop talking about cycling. And I think this area, the province understood probably first that there was a lot more potential, economic potential, in having a little bit of a shoulder on a road that could attract people who would actually spend a lot of money if they had a cycling touring destination. So those are the kinds of policy decisions I'm talking about.
And Michelle, that is a huge task to try to align that
Yep,
policy. I mean,
it's huge.
we're hearing every day about ways that policies are impacting small business in a very negative way. And it's not that it's just not aligned.
Right.
And especially in light of the Ivany report.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think this is an area that needs a lot of discussion and a lot of discipline, and especially around tourism, because everything gets labeled as good for tourism. And, everything is not actually good for tourism.
I agree.
Some things are really good for your community and they achieve broader objectives, but they're not necessarily going to attract people to your destination. So I think we have to get a lot of discipline about that around policy. And understand, like, what are the things that are actually going to attract people here and align with policy. I think that's actually a very big job for Tourism Nova Scotia to be involved with, is to do a lot of research on that, present that research, shop it around, be very, very active in that area.
Well, that's like around policies for bed and breakfasts and all those things where
All of
tourists. I mean, here we
Yeah.
don't have hotels. You need to stay in a bed and breakfast. So
Yeah, all of it.
anything that changes the bed and breakfast opportunity,
Right.
it can be very hurtful. Some of the policies that.
Right, so it can be policies that are specific to the industry or policies that are outside the industry that impact the industry,
Yes.
that need to be looked at through a tourism lens.
Okay.
So one of the examples I would use that if we were trying to build the Cabot Trail today, it wouldn't be a coastal route. Because the cost of doing the environmental impact assessment on the coast would be so expensive that we put inland because it's cheaper. And so how do you get to kind of thinking things through, kind of what's the big idea you're trying to accomplish? And off you go. So
I like the days when you had to call ahead.
that's
We're coming one way, don't get on it.
Yeah. But just on the issue of things being done in the name of tourism that aren't tourism, this is probably the biggest issue that I want to spend more time on. everything that's done in the name of tourism is helpful. The example I would use is when I was working for Tourism Canada, there was a lot of effort and a lot of interest in making investments in the 200th anniversary of the War of 1812, and making a lot of investment in Canada to help commemorate that. And it was suggested that this would be a great tourism attraction. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting, because in all of my days of marketing in the U.S., I've never ever met one person who would be interested in coming to Canada to help us celebrate the 200th anniversary of the War of 1812. So it's an important thing to do, and it's important for us as Canadians, but it's not tourism. So let's be clear when you're using the word tourism. Let's be more disciplined about what's meaningful. And then community's role, and this has been a big active discussion now in Nova Scotia, is kind of what is the community's role going to be? And we talked about suggesting that community is in the best position to partner with industry to deliver destination marketing and to deliver information at a local level. And more and more, we're finding that our visitors are not coming to Nova Scotia, driving up to the border and starting their trip planning. They've got all their trip planning done. But when they come to Nova Scotia and they arrive in a community like Wolfville, they're looking for the local knowledge. They want the local insights, and they'll try and get it wherever they can. And they'll look for it at an information center. They'll look for it at the front desk of any of your businesses. They'll ask people on the street. They'll engage in different apps on their smartphones. But that's kind of where communities are best equipped. And one of the tests I say, and I'm not just saying this in Wolfville, but you can drive around Nova Scotia and tell, just when you drive into a town, whether the town thinks it's in the tourism business. This town thinks it's in the tourism business. And there's no question about that. Like you've thought through kind of what is the visitor experience, and not every community has done that. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, like, it sounds there that like everyone has to kind of buy into a bigger picture that your community is relying or has taken a position to be a tourist destination. How do you like get the community to be behind that? Like someone who doesn't feel like they play a role, but they do actually.
Yeah, so I guess, first of all, I don't think every community needs to do this.
Yeah.
But I think communities need to make a decision whether they do it. It has to be a community decision whether they want to be in the tourism business or not. And then once you kind of decide that that's a sector that you want to focus on, then there does have to be a discussion among people who live in the community about what that's going to look like.
Because like you said, the business is the people. Like,
Right.
the more.
So that does have to roll out, and we need to talk about the importance of this business. One of the things I've reflected on a lot is that I think in Nova Scotia, we've kind of accepted that some communities get it, and they see tourism as potential, and some communities don't. And we've spent a lot of time talking to communities that don't really see the potential to say, come on, we're gonna do this. And I think we should stop doing that. I think for the communities that aren't there, fine. Let's work with the ones who are there and lift them and put our efforts behind that. Because if you think about a revenue strategy, that's where you're gonna get the most return. So, and then I think at the community level, we have to have good decisions about what we want to share. So if we've got a local beach that locals really, really love, probably not, and don't want anybody else there, probably isn't something that we want to put signs to, right? So there have to be some decisions about what it is that we're trying to do together, and what it is that we want to share with visitors. Keeping that in mind, though, we're not a volume destination. Like we're not a high mass destination where we're going to have people overrunning our communities. So that's just a bit of an overview on role. So we've been working on a $4 billion strategic plan for tourism in Nova Scotia. We can't, as the Crown agency alone, do this, of course. But we've kind of created what we think we can do based on that role that I described. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And of course, we want to measure our success and how good we are. These are the 4 strategies. They kind of reflect that role that I spoke about earlier. The only one that's not there that I didn't talk about yet is building Nova Scotia's tourism confidence. And this is really to say that good at tourism, even if they can't even describe what that means. But because other people have told them that their ads are great, it's given them confidence. And I think that we need more of that confidence in Nova Scotia, because we often tend to think about, we kind of don't accept tourism or appreciate tourism as an important part of our economy in all circles. So we've got that now right up there as one of the strategies that we think we need to address.
What's the market of highest return?
Yeah, and what's the money? Yeah, what's the best need?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about that. Okay, so
Oh, you guys are getting ahead of yourselves.
I'm glad you asked that question.
I think I know.
So then we have to we want to talk about brand. I said it's kind of weird to talk about branding a province, but we've not had a lot of discipline about how we've taken the Nova Scotia tourism brand to market over the long course of the years, and we need to come back to that discussion. I believe that brand has to be rooted in the fact that we're surrounded by the ocean. We have the most accessible ocean in Canada, and for a tourism destination, one of the most accessible long coastlines in the world. Like, that's unique positioning that we just have to leverage. And I've also said it has to be agnostic of funding, because sometimes we let funding arrangements dictate what our brand is. So for instance, if ACOA is funding the 4 Atlantic provinces to be in Europe, then we're there as Atlantic Canada. Well, that makes no sense. You can't find Atlantic Canada on a map. People don't exactly know what that even means. So I was there earlier this year with the WestJet launch of the Glasgow flight, and everything they had in the market was, Halifax, Glasgow, everything. It didn't even say Nova Scotia. And you have to know a lot about your geography, really, to know kind of exactly that Halifax. Oh yeah, that's in Atlantic Canada, because people just kind of don't know that if they're not really aware of your destination. So we have to be a little bit, in marketing terms, this is about having a good brand architecture that understands kind of what your brand is, no matter who's funding you or no matter what else is coming at you. It's staying disciplined around that. So why first-time visitors? So this has been probably the area that I've had the most discussion about since we started to hone in on what our marketing target is. And first of all, I want to say that we care about all visitors. This is just who we're actually going to try and get more of them here. And it gets back to that message I said earlier, that it's where marketing will have the most influence, is with first-time visitors. Because again, repeat visitors are not as influenced by marketing. It also, if you take a look at this slide, it's kind of interesting. So it also shows where we're going to get the best return. I was actually talking to Judy about something about this earlier. So what this slide is telling on the left-hand side is that 40% of our visitors are coming here to visit friends and relatives. That's what VFR means. So those people are not actually that influenced by marketing. They're coming, they're the people that are eating our food and sleeping on our couches. And we love them, but they're coming to see us no matter what the marketing can influence a little bit, makes them feel good, but they're coming to visit their friends and relatives. So that's 40% of our tourist population. 20% of our tourist population are people who are coming for business. So we can influence some of that, especially the ones who are coming to attend meetings and conventions that we bid on and won that business for Nova Scotia. But the corporate sector that are traveling for business purposes, we're not really influencing them by marketing, not influencing them at all by marketing. 5% are, there's a 5% of other, which includes some commuting and some military transit and stuff like that. People that I don't think should be classified as tourists, but this is an international definition. But there's 34% of people that are traveling for pleasure. So that's the sweet spot. That's the people that we can actually influence by marketing. And if you take that 34% and then blow that out, we can see that 76% of them have been here before, and 24 haven't. So if you think about what our strategy needs to do, we think our strategy needs to get more pleasure visitors and more first-time visitors. So we want to grow that 34% to a much higher number of the overall pie, and then we want to make sure that we have a very healthy proportion of first-time visitors coming in that. And then we'll measure success by how many of those first-time visitors are coming, because if they're in the blue part of that right hand, you can see that they're likely to come back if they've been here
just
No,
curious
this is
about,
just,
no, I mean just like how many people annually come, because like also you could grow the entire pot, right? You don't need to necessarily take from the other ones.
well, we could grow the entire pot, but we actually don't, if, for a revenue strategy, we're not actually trying to get more friends and relatives to come. Because they don't spend as much money. So we do want to grow the entire pot, but disproportionately we want to grow people who spend more money. So that's,
But like,
that's what we're talking
what's
about.
that number of 34%? Like, what is that?
Well, the out-of-province visitation to Nova Scotia this year, actually for the first time in a long time, is going to top 2 million. So we get about 2 million out-of-province visitors to the province. And I'll show you where they come from at the end of the presentation.
So that 2 million is that your left-handed?
Yeah.
That's your 2 million of the left-handed crowd,
That's
your
right.
left-handed pie.
Yeah.
And your right-handed pie, the 24%, the 24 to 76, the per capita visitor, does the 24% spend more money per capita or the 76
No.
per capita?
No, all pleasure visitors spend about the same whether they've been here before or not.
Okay.
So they're just a lucrative, they're a lucrative market. So when we say invest in markets of high return, that's your other question. We used to think about markets only as geographic markets, like we're marketing in Boston or in Toronto, or and now we have a lot more tools to figure out who would potentially come to Nova Scotia, and we kind of know generally where they are geographically, but we also can target them. Most importantly, by psychographics. So we know what their motivation is to travel, and we know whether or not we've got the right kind of experiences to sell to them. So this business, where it used to be geography and then layering demographics on top of geography, has now become much more a business of focusing on psychographics. What is the person's motivation to travel, and whether or not coming here is the best thing. So we're not just saying we're a great destination for all those baby boomers in New England. Everybody thinks that they're a great destination for them. So we want to be more precise about in those markets. And we also know that we could bust out of geographic markets if we could find people who are interested in coming to Nova Scotia no matter where they were in the world. So if they could get here. So that's what we mean by saying markets of highest return. So we're talking about people who spend the most money while visiting here. We used to say they should spend more and stay longer. We're looking for visitors who spend more and stay longer. In fact, we're not. We're looking just for visitors who spend more. Staying longer is one tactic to get them to spend more, but there's other ways we can get them to spend more. So that's kind of how we're defining highest return. Does that answer your question? What is the question about invest markets of highest return?
Yeah, no, I hear you.
You with me? You sound like you're doubting, so I'm gonna convince you by the end of this.
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
So then world-class experiences. So these are experiences that would in and of themselves motivate travel to Nova Scotia. So again, getting back to the thing is that, yes, we have everything, but we have to hone in on the things that are, to get people here, that are best going to be able to get them here. So I think they have to be underpinned by Nova Scotia Seacoast. We are using the work that Destination Canada, that's my old organization, the Canadian Tourism Commission, now called Destination Canada. They have a deep pool of research on something called, travel motivations, and it's a tool called the Explorer Quotient, which is just a fancy name for research. But it's been commercialized through something called the Canada Signature Experience Collection. And I think that research holds a lot more potential for Nova Scotia than we've been able to take advantage of so far. So we're going to kind of really address that. So an example of a world-class experience does not mean it has to, in my view, actually, not just my view, in any view, world-class experiences are not luxury experiences, expensive experiences. They could be just things that people would say, would see and say, I've got to go there. Like, there's nowhere else in the world I can do that. So an example would be, this year, we've been marketing the highest tides in the world for what? How long? Forever.
Oh my
right?
gosh, it's the
And
highest.
so we've got a place at Burncoat Head, which is actually the site of the highest tides in the world, and there's been some investment there to develop the site. So we did some consumer research last year and asked people kind of how they would want to experience a site that had the highest tides in the world. One of the questions was, would you ever like to dine on the ocean floor? And it spiked experience dining on the ocean floor. And white tablecloths, the tables are down there, and $250 a ticket, sold out completely. So these are not people who necessarily have a lot of money, but they said, the way I'm going to spend my money is I'm going to have that experience, because I can't have that anywhere else in the world. And I think those of us who are parents will know that our kids are spending more on experience than we ever did. And we don't even get it. Like, we don't even understand why they're prepared to spend so much money having experiences. But this is where travel is going. And so to disproportionately spend, to say, I'm going to have that experience, it's going to cost me $250, and I'm going to tell the world about it. I'm going to tweet about it, I'm going to talk about it. We're going to get travel journalists. Travel journalists are very interested in that. So that's a really good example of small business and an experience that is at a world-class destination, a world-class location. Doesn't actually take a lot of capital investment to present it, although it takes some. But it's not what you think about when you think about world-class experience. It's just things that you can do here that you couldn't do elsewhere. And I think here in the Valley and here in Wolfville, we've seen the development of some of those. I think DeBauer is a great example of this. Really leveraging the world's interest in culinary experiences. People will travel and spend more money when they're having those experiences, and to put that in an environment like this is just fantastic. So that's what I'm talking about. So it can be a range of different kinds of experiences. We also, I think, have opportunity for world-class experiences that are quite latent. Not just things that we kind of pull up through our research, like happened with the dining on the ocean floor. But we've got a UNESCO World Heritage Site right here. We don't really have the kinds of experiences that can draw people. Yes, we know it's there, and they're going down their list. They're going to visit all the UNESCO sites. What is it that they're going to do at this location that's going to draw them here right now? So what's going to be the compelling experience that we present for them right now? So those are the types of things that we're talking about, doing a better job developing. And doing better at developing world-class experiences was specifically one of the recommendations under the Ivany report. And it's also emphasized as well in the playbook, I think that's what it's called, the coalition report that just came out last week.
One Nova Scotia.
The One Nova Scotia report. So they talk about this is what tourism has to do a better job at.
Just quick question. So like you guys you found that in your research. Like, when did it come into, or how did it kind of come into conversation with a local business? Like, how are those connections being made? If it's something that you guys find, like, are you posting that saying, hey, like, we found this, are there any businesses that are interested in working with us, or vice versa? If the business is like, we have this idea, like, where's the transparency there, and like, how do we create better conversation?
So this is exactly the question that this is how we're reinventing tourism in Nova Scotia. So it's like, that all sounds like it happened a little bit by chance, and it was selective, and it kind of was. I think the site, they just looked for a restaurant that was relatively close to the location, actually talked to a few, and then got this one interested. But what we need to do is do a better job of presenting that research, saying, here's so that if we are being truly, if we're good at what we do, we root everything in consumer research, and then just say, here's where we see the opportunities. Because what we've done in the past is we said, here's what we want to sell to people. Here's what we think we're good at. So we want to sell this. Let's go out and find someone who wants to buy what we're selling. And it's just, that doesn't really work, right? So let's figure out what consumers want and match that with what we think we can be good at, and then it will be great. So as we develop, we are reinventing our mandate. We have a new sector development section coming together, and we're investing a lot more in market research and a lot more in getting that research out to industry in a way that they can consume it. Because it says it just won't be a bunch of tables. And
who recorded that as well?
Pardon me?
Who recorded it? Who videotaped? Who did the recording of the? It's on YouTube.
The ocean floor?
Mm-hmm.
Dining on the ocean floor?
Yeah.
That was, we were just actually taping it, or taping the operators, doing an interview with the operators, but
in Harborville too. Cause they did one, a couple in Harborville.
Okay, I don't know.
The
I'd have to
Japanese,
see that one.
It was me.
Another example, just so that you can have things that you can really relate to, is the southwestern part of Nova Scotia has the dark sky designation, and I think other parts of Nova Scotia can actually have great dark sky. But anyway, they wanted to produce a time-lapse video of a dark sky night, and that's a really good idea. Video is really how consumers want to see about destinations now. Everything has to be on video. So they got a great clip of a dark sky night, which I think has great potential to go out on social media platforms. They edited it into a 2-minute film. And I said, no, get it out of a 2-minute film. Like, keep it as a 10-second clip that's shareable, right? So we have to think about that too, that we need to share our content differently in ways. Think about how your kids share content. That's how the travelers share content as well. It's little clips that catch attention. They're the things that get on YouTube and really go viral. And that's the second last point here. Advocacy is the single biggest driver of consideration. And someone told me today to change the language there because it's too jargony, and I will. But what that's really saying is that other people advocating for our destination, that has the most impact on people wanting to come here than us. So it's no longer, like, when was the last time you wanted to go to a destination and you tried to find the website, the official website of that destination as your first thing you did to get the information? It's usually not what you do. You usually go to another website, you want to go out and see what travelers are saying. You probably will end up on the website of the official destination at some point in your research and your planning, but it's not where you're going to get advice on whether or not this is a good destination.
So influence and marketing is that a big part of that strategy there?
Yeah, so the way we need to respond to that is to set platforms that great advocacy can happen. So that.
But do you work with I noticed an increase of travel bloggers, so people who are kind of endorsing Nova Scotia.
Yeah, influencers.
Influence marketing, because there's a startup in Halifax, Ivany, and they do really good campaign insights and partnering up even with local companies. I don't know if that's part of your strategy, but for specific campaigns, it's very, very good at identifying key influencers in specific markets.
Okay, so I don't know that group, but I let you.
I can talk to you.
Okay, because that's exactly what this strategy is about. Is to say,
influencer marketing.
Yeah, is to work through the influence of others, right? And have the platforms to do that. And then, of course, we have to figure out what to do about Nova Scotia's icons. So this has been a big discussion in Nova Scotia. Are we leading with the icons? Are we not leading with the icons? The icons are going to be part of this, but not every icon has a world-class experience. And I would say the Blue Nose would be an example of that. The Blue Nose is an icon, but we have to make sure it's also a world-class experience. So those are the things that we need to make
Well,
sure.
the publicity around it the last 5 years has not been great.
But
That's nothing to do with the Blue Nose itself. That's just
Yeah.
that's
No,
just
I know, but it's.
poor project
poor.
management and poor spending. But
Have you ever
Blue
sailed
Nose
on
didn't
the
do
Blue?
anything to us.
Have you sailed on the Blue?
yes, I can.
Yes.
It's a spectacular experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is
Right.
incredible
So-
There's been a
experience.
lot.
So, but I would say that on the issue of the negative media, we did a lot of
Yeah.
surveying on people coming off Blue Nose this year, and they're not influenced by the negative media at all. They were just happy to be there.
Great.
In fact, there was a reporter down there. It's actually a really funny clip. I think we should do it as just for fun. But the reporter was going around trying to get someone to say something negative about the Blue Nose, and they
A
went around.
reporter?
A reporter.
Really?
And speaking to visitors, and they were like, "No, I'm good, I'm happy." It was a day when the Blue Nose didn't sail, so they just got on board and they weren't able to sail. So, aren't you mad that you got all the way here and didn't sail? No, I'm not mad. People are friendly.
Oh, you should use that.
Yeah.
That
So
would be a little answer.
anyway, it's we need to figure out how to translate our icons into actual world-class experience.
Blue Nose always in Lunenburg? Is it
No.
always
No.
there?
No.
No.
Halifax.
Hit or miss.
Halifax.
Hit or miss.
Halifax, Boston.
traveled around Nova Scotia in 2015, and there was a published schedule for where it was going.
That's cool. Glad to know about that.
So what we're saying is that would need to be published like really well in advance, and so people could plan for that, and know where it's going. So it can't be just popping off.
Yeah, Wolfville needs to plan for it to arrive here.
Down the river.
We worked that waterfront, guys, and we're sitting on a gold mine there.
Yes.
Smallest registered port in the world.
Used to be,
Used to be.
it could still be.
It could still be.
You mentioned the Devour Festival, and that was a great leverage for this community because of our, culinary abilities here and connection to the film. We have two great theaters in the community, but there's more opportunity there in festivals. We see that bring in lots of international tourists. I've seen it in PEI this summer with the Fall Flavors Festival connected to the Food Network with celebrity chefs coming in. There's people all over from North America that came in for that. A significant amount of American tourists that came in for that year after year. They're the people that had a first-time experience there and have continued to come back year after year. So bridging that gap of those two different pleasure visitors. So, Apple Blossom here is a big thing, and we had Oyster Fest in Halifax for the first time ever. That was great. And speaking to people that came from away for Oyster Fest, they almost kind of stumbled upon it. It was just coincidental that they came. But is there a marketing opportunity and infrastructure and capital support for those festivals that, the icon of the Blue Nose is great, but how do we leverage our landscapes, our culinary abilities, our craft beer, wine industry in festivals that can bring people in that pleasure tourism category?
I think that really gets into that whole question about world-class experiences. What are those things that we can present that we can be great at, that people can get here better than they get elsewhere? And events is a big part of how we can do that. I only mentioned the Blue Nose as it related to Nova Scotia's icons because this has been a big discussion among the tourism industry. Where do the icons fit in this? And there's a belief that all we market is icons, like tourism Nova Scotia. So it's false, but it always comes up in discussion, so I raised it. But I think that we can do a much better job, or should do a much better job in events. And the One Nova Scotia report, the strongest recommendation they make about tourism is that we should do a better job at events. So it's a very good point that you're making. So that's world-class experience. I'll talk a little bit about Nova Scotia tourism confidence. This really gets into educating Nova Scotians about what the sector's about and why it's important, and help Nova Scotians believe that we can actually double tourism revenues and get behind that goal and can be part of the whole presentation. And I think that this gets to a question we asked earlier, is that we actually are all playing a role in delivering this destination experience, and I think we're kind of good at that, but we also have to understand that being friendly is not necessarily the same as providing good service. So we have to get really, really good at providing great service, and that's what will, I think, get us to the next level. And I say that with great respect, but it's something that I think we just need to be spending more time on, so that if we're in a place like this and we are a wine destination, we better have everybody working on the front line understanding what they're talking about when they're asked questions about wine. And those are things that we don't necessarily see as part of our training at the moment.
So there's new training kind of for specific?
No, that was just an example. But I think that this is something that we're talking to the Tourism Industry Association about, various industry associations, that service needs to be a part of this strategy. Because when people get great service, they spend more money. So that's...
And they come back.
And they come back.
Service is...
So service is a huge driver of spend. So I told you I would show you our math of where people are coming from and what we're trying to do here. These are all the assumptions. I'm not going to go through them one by one. And I can spend more time on people in the audience who want to drill down this. I always find there's one or two that really want to go here, and I'm happy to because Nova Scotians account for about 40% of the spend that we currently have. So we have $2 billion being spent in tourism. About 40% of that is being spent by Nova Scotians. That's great spend, but we can't rely on a province that has a declining population for that to continue to go up. Now, we hope the population issue will turn around as well, but we've made the assumption that that would be flat, that spend would be flat, and that this would be an export-driven strategy. We've also said that we want everybody who's coming here now from all our markets to spend more. We want to get more yield from those markets. So again, if we have better experiences to offer them, if we have great service, and if they find things that they love to do, that they're dying to do, and they think that they can only do it here, and they're prepared to spend that money, that's the assumption that everybody who's coming needs to spend more, as well as we get more people who spend. So here's the map. This is very small. I apologize for that. But, so really, if you look at the top number, we're saying that we want visitation to grow from 1.9 million in 2013, that's actually 2 million this year, to 2.7 million by 2024. Yeah. So we're not trying to double the number of visitors, we're just trying to get people from, who have more money. So there are people who are come from further away. So the further you go, the further someone comes from away, the more they spend when they get here. I guess that's a little bit intuitive. So we're really trying to drive overseas markets, drive the U.S. market, and drive the Ontario market, not so much Atlantic Canada. But we are trying to get growth in every one of these markets, and we're trying to get premium, which is more spend from every single one of those markets as well. And we've introduced China as a market, as a target market, which we haven't had in the past.
What's the number of Chinese visitors right now?
It's not even counted. It's included in overseas.
Okay, but that will change. That's changing.
Yeah, we're going to change. We're going to start to count and report on it. But even if we did a better job, marketing to the families of our international students, we could go a long way too. We want to try and get 50,000 Chinese
Or
visitors
some of the
by
ones who want to
2024.
stay here and are looking for an opportunity.
So that's another,
Mandarin, like,
yeah, it's a
who
whole
knows how to
other
speak Mandarin?
How many people live in the eastern United States?
millions and millions and millions.
50 million?
50 million.
50 million.
The
And
name
we're getting 109,000.
360.
And we get 500,000 from Ontario. Why is that?
We're getting 160,000 from the U.S. right now.
Yeah, 160,000, and there's 50 million people live
Yeah.
there.
Actually, it's double that.
What's that?
It's 100.
So the question is, could we do better? Could we do better?
Yeah, and why is it that we're not getting more U.S. visitors when they're...
Usually I get asked why we're being so aggressive on the U.S. market. I'm actually very happy to get asked the question of could we...
Gas prices are significant in that factor.
Well, I think there's a number of factors. It's a very, very, very competitive market. It's a very competitive market.
Yeah, there's a lot of... But I'm sure Ontario is very competitive too, but we're doing...
Well, I would say that the U.S., the northeastern U.S., the New York market is a very competitive market. So right now, if you were trying to shop for the travel out of New York, you would be able to fly a couple to London, England, and back, return.
For less than you take the
A single
ferry.
person coming to Halifax.
It's my experience living in Ontario for a long time that they do not compete favourably with the American tourist market. The Americans are first class of service. They welcome it there much more than Ontario does. Pretty bad experience.
Yeah, so the question is though, the potential for the U.S. market for Nova Scotia is huge. Huge. So it'd be nice to knock that number right out of the
Same
ballpark.
with Europe, I would think. I mean,
Yeah.
I think he brought up a good point though, like Americans really value service, and I don't know if we hit that out of the park yet.
No,
So,
we
like,
don't.
And so like I feel like I've
We're just
talked to
nice.
a lot of Americans who come up here and say, you have great things, but you don't really deliver all the time. So like, is that going to get repeat customers?
When I came here to
Whereas
Ontario-
Canadians are probably a little bit more, there's a little bit more
the total
Ontario,
friendly,
I
we
was
think that that
surprised at
means.
the lack of service.
Pardon?
When I came here from Ontario 20 years ago, I was surprised at the low level of service here.
So that has to improve. So could we do better than this? I think we probably could. A lot of it depends upon, certainly for the overseas market, it depends upon air access and how much we can improve in that regard as well. But the point that Americans have a very high expectation on service levels is absolutely true, and we absolutely have to get better at that.
Do you ever break out the American tourist number into those that fly and those that actually drive?
Yes. Yeah, and this year, we had higher growth in drive than fly.
No wonder.
There's a lot of American plates around.
Yeah. We all saw that, right? It was a very good year this year.
So is road infrastructure something key to that?
Yes.
Well, there's actually been some road infrastructure developments that have helped us, like through Maine, New Brunswick. Remember the old route, that old airline route, whatever it was in Maine?
Yeah.
That's all.
It's looking good these days.
Do you think a large opportunity there is like the history that Nova Scotia has played in American, like, or does that matter to them? Because there's so many.
Americans don't really know about other people's history.
No.
Isn't that our story to tell? Like, that's our story.
You're so
They're not that
kind.
interested in other people's history.
If you make the story interesting, though.
Yeah, and if you make it more, if you connect it more to something
Like
that they have an interest in, then they're very interested. And there's a lot of history buffs in the U.S. as well, who are interested in what.
Especially in the New England states.
Yeah, so for that market, I think there's absolutely a market there. But to go in with a history message in our general marketing,
But
okay.
a niche.
Absolute niche, absolutely. Yeah, there's a huge market there because there's a lot of buffs. So here's just a couple of examples. We've already talked about one of what success looks like. So that's dining on the ocean floor. These are some examples that I'm actually using this weekend at the tourism conference.
How often did Dine on the Ocean Floor happen? Like how
It
many-
happened once a week
For how long?
for I think 9 or 10 weeks. It was
Okay.
just a really small little experience.
Yeah.
Got all kinds of buzz. So it's in,
I just wanted to mention that we had pop-up dinners in the vineyards here.
yes.
They're similar, and they were so well received.
Yeah. In fact, I did one with a group of travel journalists. We did a pop-up dinner in a vineyard here with a movie.
Yes.
It was connected to promoting Devour. And I just thought it was the coolest thing I had ever done.
know,
Like,
yeah.
we had this great meal and then it got dark and then there was a full moon and we watched a movie. It was just like going to the drive-in, but you had to drink water. And
Did you see the ticket price for that? It's $250 a person
yeah.
for the dining on the ocean floor?
Yeah.
All right.
Fish.
I actually don't know what they serve. I didn't get to go to it. And I wouldn't anyway, because I would never want to go if someone else would pay $50 to get there. That's what they should do.
The
But
YouTube video is from Taste Nova Scotia.
Taste Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
excellent.
it was
They're a great partner for us as well. So these are the examples that I'm using this weekend of what success looks like. And I want to use examples that featured small business because I think that's a really important theme that we need to develop. Postal cycling, elevating world-class experiences. This is something I talked about a little bit earlier. We're getting better at this. We've just established a blue route in Nova Scotia. Do we know about the blue route? Yeah, so that's a huge, it's not a vast route yet, but it's a great start to putting us on that map.
We also
And
have
then
Rails to Trails too, the Rails to Trails program is a great program.
My daughter's calling me on I have 2 phones here, and she's just calling me.
There might be something important there.
Yeah, I guarantee so. So then, if it was important, she'd get her sister to call me. So then Lewisburg. I thought this was really interesting because we've been talking about Lewisburg for a long time, and is anybody here been to Lewisburg?
I've been in the enactment, reenactments are wonderful.
They are wonderful.
And they get
It is the
Yeah.
jewel
huge
of Nova
crowds
Scotia.
from the
So
States.
it is,
Getting there.
it's amazing,
That's the-
right, so
Bay is a jewel.
anyway,
Lewisburg.
one of those iconic things, but once Nova Scotia's been there once, you kind of don't feel the need to go back and kind of check that off. It's kind of far away, don't know if you're going to do that again.
Can we
Sherbrooke
move it
Village.
to Lunenburg?
So anyway, I don't know if you know this company, Authentic Seacoast. Does anyone know the Authentic Seacoast company? They're this company that's gone into Guysborough and has started to build up
Oh, yes.
a development there, and they bought the inn and the pub, and they started a brewery and a distillery and a coffee. So basically, they went into the tourism business and realized that tourism season for them was quite short, and they had to diversify. So they started diversifying into a number of other businesses, which got them into the alcohol business. But anyway, they ended up distilling a rum. They're the people who also make Sea Fever rum, which has become quite popular. But they made this Fortress rum, which is being aged in barrels in Fortress Lewisburg. So that's kind of the angle they got on their rum, and people thought, well, that's pretty cool. And then there's a local chocolate company that got involved that makes handmade chocolates. And Lewisburg this year presented a certain experience which was a rum and chocolate tasting at the Fortress. And it by far was the most popular thing to do at Lewisburg this year. So it came completely out of nowhere. It came out of the inspiration of entrepreneurs who kind of saw an opportunity, approached Lewisburg with the opportunity to age the rum and to come in and do this. And then Lewisburg, the Parks Canada staff were able to translate that into this tasting experience. And all of a sudden, it's a new reason to go back to Lewisburg for people who maybe hadn't been back in a long time. So it's just a fun example. And you really can't do that anywhere else in the world, right? So it's also kind of world class.
Ma'am, can I ask you a question about seasonal restaurants? How are they doing in the last 10 years or so? Are they?
I think that again, I hear a lot of, since I've been back, that there's a lot of trouble. That's a very challenging sector to be in.
Because if you can't go, people like to go to eat, and if you can't go to eat,
Yeah.
you're not going to have a really good experience. So I'm just wondering why is that? Is it because of the volume, or is it because of the economics of it? Short season, or the?
I hear a lot of different things. I hear it's hard to get staff.
Yeah. Okay,
Staffing
because of
is
short season.
very challenging.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually the thing I hear the most. It's difficult to.
But
For
Nova
how
Scotia
long
the
is it
only
open
one.
every summer?
PEI just shuts down after the long week, or
So
the
does Lunenburg.
Thanksgiving weekend. I mean,
Fort
the whole line.
Fort Anne is closed.
But isn't that the elephant in the room with
Early?
tourism? Like, how does tourism, like, isn't the key to tourism success is to extend, like, Devour was what, November, whatever it was, that's November. That's
Right.
tourism in November.
You will
So
never
how do
hear
you guys
me.
extend that tourism season 12 months? Like, we would have tourism in Nova Scotia
So
12
I think we have
months.
to stop talking about season.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
think you should start talking about tourism.
Well, let me just.
But that doesn't work for your
we
restaurant.
we have a little cottage down in the South Shore. There's a little restaurant at the end of our bay. Great little restaurant. They started closing, this is right in the middle of the summer, on Monday and Tuesday nights, okay? And I'm thinking, something's gotta be wrong. Why are they closing?
Right.
It's gotta be, so,
So this is their day off, right? So,
well, no, you don't have a day off when your season's only.
I know.
Okay?
but if you go to PEI, they're all closed on
But
Monday.
the restaurants, like the numbers are going down, I can see it.
So this is the service thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like
Right, and
being
I'm
open when
thinking,
your customer's there.
why is that? Why is it?
Well, I think that there's been issues around succession in some of those businesses. I think I know your business that you're talking about. I don't know if that's the
It's a
one.
seaside shanty in Chester Basin, it's a great little restaurant. It closes.
So in some cases, there's no one to take over the businesses, and the people who are there are running them on the hours that they can manage.
Is that the one that's up for sale as well?
It's for
Yes.
sale, yeah, but I mean, it
For sale.
used to be open 7 days a week, and then the last year or so, they're closing it. And the
So
other-
this is
the
a
other
challenge in
restaurants-
different areas of Nova Scotia. I think you had one of the biggest challenges interested, I know I'm gonna run out of time here, but just to try and tell one story. I was really interested in Lunenburg last year. I just got back, took a friend down to Lunenburg. There was a big lineup in front of a store
Yeah.
on the main street there.
Yeah, I know where it is, yeah.
And I thought, what's going on? I've got to, we have to stop, well, you want fish and chips, best fish and chips in Canada. So I haven't even heard of this place.
Oh,
Yeah, it's only been open
So
3
you
weeks.
just- yeah, I know where it is.
But someone from CTV came and decided they're the best fish and chips in Canada. We're all lined up.
Yeah.
So 20 minutes later, I'm still in the lineup. 30 minutes later, I get in, and this is for takeout,
Yeah.
okay? So we get the takeout, I go to pay for it. I've got 2 pieces of fish and chips, and I paid $18.
Right.
And I thought, this is awesome, because like, these people have figured out something that, no, like, they're delivering high quality.
Right.
It was very good service, very high quality. People were lined up to pay the money. Now, if someone had said a month before that people would be lined up to pay $18 for 2 pieces of fish and some chips, no one would have believed it. But it speaks to where the opportunity is that people deliver against it, right? And so those are some of the opportunities that we have. I don't have all the answers, but I think that we do have some challenges.
It helps that the chef has the number 1 in Canada 3
Yeah,
times.
that's
Through with stuff.
The restaurant, right?
Yeah.
But you talk about not wanting seasons, like in service, you know, it's all endemic in the whole system, and the Ivany report touched on it, is like, how do we get young people to stay here? Because we can't keep people raising family at $10 an hour, minimum wage. So those guys, you know, they work here in the summer, and they bust their butt, and then the restaurant shuts at September 1st, it's done, we're done, we're out. And then they go to Whistler and make $30 an hour and bust their butt and do a great job, and they never come home. And isn't that the root of the Ivany report, is growth in the young people? So that is what tourism has to get, is get those guys, those people, people to stay here, and they have to make a meaningful living as a young family.
Right, so we
How
have
do
to
we do
find
that?
ways to pay them more,
Absolutely.
right?
You charge $18 for the fish.
Yeah, but there's, but that's an owner of a restaurant, that's not the guy, that's not the
That's the
service
guy
guy.
who's making them.
That's not the service person, that's not the
He's
guy
making
who's
$10
servicing.
an hour.
That's right, exactly.
Tips.
But the job finishes, you know, the restaurant closes. How do you get those guys to stay? And that was the root of the Ivany report, was to grow the population, period. That was my
We do have to have
interpretation.
those opportunities for young people to stay.
Make them
And
stay.
I do think it has to come through them having more opportunity to earn more money. So, which is why a revenue strategy, I think, makes sense. So we're leaning in, and businesses are more profitable, which they should be through a revenue strategy, then they'll have more money to pay people.
But doesn't that just turn around, like you read more, but then if you don't broaden the season, they're gonna turn around and be drawing unemployment. We're back to the welfare state
Absolutely.
in the winter time.
So Authentic Seacoast is a good example, and I'm gonna just, I want to use 2 examples, and I'll confess right now that these 2 examples, these 2 people sit on the Tourism Nova Scotia board, so I'll just say, I'm not promoting people who sit on my board, but when we were talking about this series and talking about investors, these are both examples of outside money coming into Nova Scotia, investing in product that's become very world-class, and these are the examples I was asked to speak about. So I'm just declaring kind of who they are. So here's Cabot Links. Has anybody been to Cabot Links?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so I have an interesting history with this because I was a deputy minister of tourism in Nova Scotia in the early 2000s, and my minister, who was Rodney McDonald, asked me to meet with some people who were coming to town to talk. He called them the town fathers from Inverness, and sure enough, they were all men, and they came in and they wanted to tell me about their vision to build a world-class golf course on the coal mine site, the old abandoned coal mine site in Inverness Beach. Oh yeah, okay. So I'll take that meeting. So, and this is the time we had invested a lot in golf courses in the name of we were going to be a golf destination, and it wasn't really working. And COA wasn't going to do any more golf course development. We weren't really supposed to talk to golf course people anymore. So anyway, in they come, and then as I talked to them, I realized they actually weren't looking for me to help them build a golf course. They weren't actually asking them to help me do anything. They were just telling me that their vision was when the remediation on the site happened, they wanted the site to be shaped so that it could potentially attract a golf course developer. So they were just asking for help getting it shaped a certain way as opposed to money. I thought, well, that's easy, like, figure that out. Surely God, if you've got a bulldozer, you can move dirt this way versus that way. So anyway, when they left the room, I thought that's a really interesting idea. You know, it's never going to happen. That was my own thought, because I thought, like, that's just so out there. And then, of course, off I go, and they made that happen. And they, attracted an investor, and they saw the potential. And now they have world-class golf course, and that business attracts more first-time visitation to Canada than any other private business in Canada.
Wow.
Big.
So it's a huge success story. Their second course was just named by the top course in North America by Golf Digest. So just a great success story. It is a seasonal business, so that people are not there with year-round incomes, but they're employing 200 people, and it's and the school in Inverness is a growing population. The elementary school in Inverness is a growing population. So it's and the tax base in Inverness is increasing. So it's a great tourism example.
Chase the Ace didn't hurt.
So there's just some shots of that course.
Oh, look at it, it's so gorgeous, oh my God.
That's the,
And those old row houses, miners' houses were there, it's just so interesting.
and then this is the other example I was talking about. This is Glenn Williams in Guysborough. Now, who's been to Guysborough? That's harder to get to.
Worth it though.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful little spot. And so this is another investor with money coming in and thinking, I'm going to do something here. Not from here, but had been here over a number of summers and said, I'm going to take some of my investment and try and do something with this town because he didn't like seeing it. And so it was hard for the town to kind of react to that. Like, what do you do when you have someone from away who comes in and wants to make that kind of investment? So then the town has to start thinking about, well, how do I work with this guy? And we don't really know how to work with these people, right? So they have to figure that out. But they have figured it out. So I think this is a great example of the transformative impact of private sector-led investment, because there's been a lot of community economic development work being done in Guysborough over a long period of time as that economy has been changing. But it took a private investor to come in and have that vision and then start to move that. So I think we have to find more of those people. Like where they've come, they've had a great impact. So let's go out and find more of them, because we've got lots more of this kind of potential.
Much more accountability there.
And in this case, they started with the tourism business, and then they started to diversify as they realized that they needed to deal with seasonality, and they needed to keep their workers in Guysborough year-round. So now the workers are engaged in a number of different businesses. So they started working in the pub. The guy who came, some guy followed his girlfriend back here. He's from the UK, I think, and from France. Where is he from? Somewhere in Europe. Now he's become the expert coffee roaster, and he started working in the bar there, and they roast coffee that they sell as well. It's actually very good coffee. So here's some of the businesses that Authentic Seacoast runs: the Bar Manor, the Rare Bird Pub. They also have a beer, Rare Bird beer, Rare Bird Ale. Fortress Rum, that's the rum that is aged in the caskets at Lewisburg. Oh, and that's it.
All right.
So, I just want to talk to you tonight about kind of what's happening in tourism, and it's nice to talk to an audience that has some tourism experts in this audience, but also people who haven't really thought about this before. But I know that everyone likes to travel. Usually people like to travel, or they've had experience traveling, so it's an interesting thing to talk about because everyone has something to say about it, and they've had experiences with it, and pretty much everyone loves living in Nova Scotia, so we're invested in the success of Nova Scotia as a destination. in this town and throughout the Annapolis Valley. This area has great potential, and it's not without challenge. But I think as we kind of think about, could we actually double revenue? There is a way to do that.
Can I just ask you one other question about the Airbnb phenomenon, where people are renting out privately? Is there any way that the tourism department can leverage that somehow or tap into that? Because there's a lot of controversy about that from the traditional tourist operators, right? Because those folks are not paying anything on commercial taxes or all that sort of thing. I mean, how is that, how extensive is that, and how is that debate playing out, or I'm just curious.
So it's a really good question. So what are we doing about, I would say it's Airbnb, it's Uber, it's a number of the different areas that are really disrupting the distribution system that we have for tourism and travel services. So in this province, we've been definitely having that discussion about kind of, it skews the competitive landscape if, a certain segment of the industry has a regime, a regulatory regime, and others don't. So that's a very active discussion. It has to do with, do we need to update or modernize, that regulatory regime?
Well, I'm not suggesting that. I'm thinking about embracing it somehow rather than fighting it.
Well, I think the
I'm
industry
just
has
curious
embraced
about
it.
what the
I think visitors have embraced it, I should say.
Yeah.
And a number of our operators sell their inventory on Airbnb, so I think the industry is also embracing it. But the thing is, customers have really embraced it. So how do we deal with that? And I would say on the disruptive side is causing some challenge in terms of how we actually adapt to that going forward. And that it's actually a very active discussion. I'm involved in it today. But I think customers will lead the way. They're deciding how they want to book, where they want to go. TripAdvisor is the most influential travel site now, bar none, in terms of people picking where they want to be. And so there will continue to emerge these different major influencers and different distribution networks. And I think we have to find ways to embrace that in ways that don't create disadvantage to our base of our industry.
Sorry, to answer your question earlier about how can we keep youth here, I really think that it could go a long way with actually trying to empower youth. So this lack of understanding or education around something like Airbnb, I don't think there would be too many people of my age who actually don't understand that. And so that conversation, or putting someone that's looking for employment or an opportunity, whether it's a small little honorarium or contract, to work with a Tourism Nova Scotia or the Bed and Breakfast Associations or whatever, to try and at least share the story of what Airbnb is, the benefits, how they can use it to get new customers, or some of the actual drawbacks, and trying to work that out and bringing youth into part of the solution. Also seniors too. Part of the solution, not part of the problem, which I think was a huge miss on the Ivany report.
Yeah, I think also that the whole sharing economy is huge. I've got my son right now is driving his bicycle from Vancouver to the tip of South America on the coast. Not entirely thrilled about him going through Central America, but anyway, off he goes. And he's using a site called Warm Showers. Somebody heard of Warm Showers? So Warm Showers is other cyclists who offer a spot for warm showers to other cyclists who are on the road, people in their homes. And he arrived in San Francisco with a warm shower place, and the guy left him the keys to the car and the house. Just because he's a cyclist on the road, he must be a good guy, and he had a good reputation on this website. And I thought, there's no part of that makes sense to me.
That's because you're a mom.
Well, you're building your reputation.
That's because you are a mom.
Yeah, but I just don't even get it. Who would do that? First of all, who wants to go into people, I don't want to go and do that. And I would never
But he's
And-
having an awesome
He's having a
experience,
great-
and whoever it
That's a
was that lent
world-class experience
the
right
car keys and the house key knows
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
that's what life is all
It's
about. So he
it's
wants
the
to support
experience.
that.
And so I went on to the Warm Showers website. I thought, I gotta figure out what's going on with Warm Showers.
But
And,
that's the hitchhiking.
They're everywhere.
That's-
Yes,
that
Warm
was-
Showers.
When I was teenager, we hitchhiked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't hitchhike anymore, it's all, it's that, now it's that, that's those guys.
Yeah, it's just a fascinating thing that's what's going on, and it's really disruptive, and it's, yeah, the younger generation are just, that's what they're living their lives. So.
They don't watch TV,
Yeah,
and they don't do things like we,
I know, they just don't follow the
everything
rules.
is so.
Some things are still the
The
same.
Airbnb people are working under the radar, not being regulated. Maybe we should take the regulation off rather than trying to over-regulate the Airbnb people, because the traditional tourist operators are complaining, maybe we should ease the regulation and the tax load on them.
In fact, that's what they've said too. They
Yeah.
said that just, like, let's get some sense to this.
Right, and just accept the fact that business is done in a different way in 2015 and on, right? Instead of trying to fight it like we did with the download the music or whatever. I fought to download the music. It's the best thing that ever happened to the bands in the 60s because, younger people would never know about it unless they could get it on the internet.
I'm just gonna move away. Maybe I missed this at the beginning, but what's the perception of the valley here within tourism in Nova Scotia? Like, I feel it's quite strong, but, what's the province saying? Like, what's the importance of this area on the
Well,
overall picture?
So I think that this area has gone through such a massive change and kind of reinvented itself, right? And I think it's an example for the rest of the province. Like, I really, really do. And I think that the reputation is really, really strong. And it's led by what's happened here in culinary and wine especially. But it's reinvented what the brand is and what the reputation is. And you've got more Nova Scotians visiting than most other areas of the province, and repeat visiting. So I think it's very, very strong. It's a great example.
Does the province reward, financially speaking, areas that are leading the charge more so than others?
I'll go, Jeremy.
I mean, I think that we don't have a structure for that, but I think in terms of, there's way more content here, like from marketing, there's way more content to promote, so you get disproportionately more coverage, because there's more to talk about, more going on, there's new stuff. It makes it really.
Innovative.
Yeah. It's not a revenue, there's not a model, a funding model attached to it. Yes?
I think what Jeremy was leading into is what you were saying before, is instead of spending all our time trying to get that 20% that aren't doing anything and dragging them up, let's spend the time on the 20% that are really doing something and support them. Because traditionally, when you're considered to be an area that things are going well, you couldn't get any support because you were doing things, because everybody's trying to drag that 20% up. But what you had suggested earlier was, let's not worry about the 20% that don't want to be drug up. Let's support those that are doing things because they're going to produce a whole lot more opportunity for everybody.
So what I'm saying is, it wasn't really to talk about that in terms of funding, but to say, I don't want to apologize for featuring successful areas or in our marketing. I think that that's exactly what we should be featuring.
Yeah.
So that's how we can kind of help, right? And I think historically there's been too much pressure to say, well, we can't feature them too much. They already have a lot. Like, let's deal with this. But I think that the areas that are really focusing on tourism, presenting a lot of opportunities.